U.S. military requirements keep expanding, but the defense industrial base keeps declining. In the words of my next guest, it's shrinking, concentrated, and less diverse than ever. Bloomberg Government analyst Paul Murphy joins me with more. Paul, good to have you back.
Good to be with you, Tom.
And you have written an essay stating that as I said, the shrinking, concentrated, less diverse supplier base, DIB, defense industrial base, put some numbers on it. What led you to this conclusion? People have been talking about it, but you have some numbers.
Well, yeah, as you know, we track the government contracts data pretty closely. We have a process where we ingest all the contracts data, and so that's often where I begin my analysis. But we've been watching, the shifting defense strategy over the last several years, particularly with the release of the 2022 National Defense Strategy, where the posture of the United States has shifted dramatically to a focus on China and Russia and near-peer deterrence, which kind of naturally draws our focus and our resources overseas to distant parts of the globe and working with partners that we haven't had such a close relationship with for many years, and we're building up relationships with companies, with countries like Australia and longtime allies Japan, South Korea, but also the Philippines, the Marianas Islands, places where we sense these threats are emerging. So what we've been able to do is try and marry the spending data with this change, this shift in posture, and what we're seeing is the defense acquisition system faces a lot of challenges fulfilling its strategic goals. And what we're seeing is larger and fewer contracts are going to larger and fewer companies, and there's just a variety of interrelated factors that are leading to this trend.
Well, is the defense industrial base shrinking because the contract recipients are fewer, or are the companies really leaving the defense market and disappearing, and therefore forcing DoD into smaller numbers with more and bigger contracts?
Well, based on our unclassified prime contracts data, it absolutely is shrinking. DoD vendors are down 27.6% over the last decade or so, from over 56,000 to about 41,000. It's not entirely clear whether they are doing this because they're just disinterested in the defense industrial base. Well, we think there is some of that going on, but we also think there's a lot of other factors, market dynamics, agency trends, overall budget trends, logjams, and so forth that are contributing to this. And it's not just a disinterest in the defense industrial base, but I think it's kind of the market dynamics playing out in response to these other factors.
Right. If budgets are flat, say, in a given program area, or they're not rising very much, and companies, maybe a niche company that was seeking growth, can't find it, then they might acquire another supplier and combine, or they might be acquired, what they call, inorganic growth. But either way, there's one less company than there was before.
Absolutely. I mean, that's certainly one factor. The budgets may be flat in real terms. My numbers look more at the contracts, and what we do see is that the contract spending is up tremendously. It's up over the last decade from just under $300 billion to nearly $500 billion. So contract spending is going up, and but at the same time, the number of vendors is shrinking. The market is concentrating, and it's becoming more stratified. That the top I got a number here for you. The 20 largest vendors average 50% of DoD spending, and the dollars they've received are up 74% in the last decade. So some vendors are certainly doing very well, and I don't want to begrudge success. On the other hand, it raises questions about how DoD can successfully fulfill its commitment to its own defense strategy.
Sure. We're speaking with Paul Murphy. He's senior data analyst at Bloomberg Government. And this area of emerging technologies, and there are so many structures and mechanisms in DoD for trying to identify them, give them other transaction authority contracts and so forth. But it doesn't seem to have exactly caught fire in the sense of what you're seeing of the number of contractors regularly doing business in the DIB.
Yeah, some of these innovative programs are still a relatively small share of contract spending, but even in their own niche, they are stratified. For instance, if you look at programs that are targeting these quote unquote non-traditional vendors, like the Small Business Innovative Research Program called SBIR, the spending is up 4 times. But the top 10 vendors got half of the SBIR dollars in fiscal 2023. OTA spending, a very highly touted program, which has a big non-traditional contractor focus, vendor focus. Top 20 vendors average 80% of OTA dollars in the last decade. And even programs, traditional programs, have been around for ages, like the Simplified Acquisition Program. They're dominated dominated. A third of the dollars are devoted to large business in this program that targets small vendors.
Could it be that the American economy has all of the innovation and the capacity, even, that the Defense Department needs, but Defense Department program people and contract people are just terrible at market research, and they can't find them anymore?
Well, there's a big problem with data transparency, and there's even a proposal to track small business spending under the OTA program in the NDAA bill that's pending in Congress. I think they recognize a lot of the problems, but they're having trouble addressing them. And there are a number of possible solutions presented in this new defense industrial base strategy and in numerous NDAA provisions in the authorization bills in Congress. But they take a long time. There's a lot of contention, and it's incremental progress at best in the last several years. In the meantime, the programs that are in place or procedures that are in place to try and resolve some of these issues are just going unimplemented. For instance, there's 400 defense industry mergers and acquisitions a year, and DoD is supposed to review any that have potential for presenting threats or problems to the defense industrial base or national security. And according to GAO, they get around to studying about 40 of these mergers per year. And so they're proceeding at pace. The industry is continuing to consolidate and combine these market dynamics, with the log jams that are creating financial risk for companies and causing companies to become risk averse and become, as you pointed out earlier, less interested in the defense industry. And it all kind of feeds on itself and creates a bundle of problems that are kind of hard to unravel.
Yeah, well, I mean, they spend the money and they get the goods. Do you think that somehow, what's missing then? Flexibility or better prices?
I think there's a question about whether they even get the goods. The look at that PPBE system, the planning, programming, budgeting, and execution system. It's been around since McNamara in the Cold War in the 1960s. And it can take 2 to 4 years for a program to be conceived and budgeted and executed, and that's before you get into the actual procurement, the procurement administrative lead time and the problems of source selection and evaluating proposals and dealing with protests and all these things that can feed into delay upon delay, which tends to work to the benefit of companies that have deep pockets and are able to withstand the headwinds of the financial uncertainty.
Right, and also it means programs get stretched out. New platforms take seemingly forever to get perfected and into production. And sometimes, I'm thinking of a certain ship from a few years ago. The whole program is stillborn after a decade and billions.
Right. And look how frequently the tech companies, look how frequently your Apple Watch comes out with a new version or your Samsung phone comes out with a new version. This is the pace of commercial technological change. And if an acquisition, expand that, extrapolate on that. If an acquisition program is taking 2 to 4 years to come to fruition, you're looking at delivering a product that is generations out of date by the time it's in the hands of the soldiers.
I guess what the nation needs is a good billion-dollar carrier.
Well, the technology is really changing. And there's questions about whether these traditional technologies that helped the U.S. and the Allies win World War II are even appropriate now. They're building families of weapons, not just fighter jets, but fighter jets with uncrewed vehicles accompanying them to sense the threats over the horizon before the jets come close to their targets. Or they're building families of undersea uncrewed vehicles to accompany ships as they patrol the South China Sea. And so it's. I think there's a question about whether they're not just timing the acquisition of these systems, but whether they're making appropriate decisions to keep pace with the rapidly changing technology. I mean, the Russians have figured out how to destroy tanks.